Alex Sinclair had always been the type of guy who made an impression without even trying. At 6'2", with dark, tousled hair that never seemed to stay in place, and a smile that could light up a room, he had been the subject of many a casual flirtation in the office. He worked as a marketing analyst for a fast-paced, competitive firm in downtown Chicago. But it wasn't just his professional acumen that made him popular. It was his easygoing, approachable nature. Whether he was discussing a new campaign idea, cracking jokes during meetings, or simply offering a friendly ear to someone in need, Alex's charm made him well-liked by almost everyone. His sharp features, a mix of high cheekbones and a strong jawline, combined with his effortless style, made him someone you'd expect to see on the cover of a men's fashion magazine. Alex was the kind of guy who always dressed well, without trying too hard, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who knew his worth. Yet, despite his good looks and popularity, Alex was down to earth, never flaunting his charm or status. He wasn't interested in the shallow things that many people at the firm seemed to care about. Instead, he was more invested in real connections, and when it came to friendships, he was the guy you could always rely on. That's why, on this particular Monday morning, Alex found himself standing in the break room, half staring at his coffee mug, while his best friend Paul stood in front of him, looking unusually nervous. Paul was a fellow marketing analyst, a sharp thinker who had a knack for numbers and strategy. But when it came to matters of the heart, he wasn't as confident. He was shorter than Alex, with sandy brown hair that always looked a little too messy for someone so meticulous. Though he wasn't unattractive, Paul was known for his awkwardness in social situations, especially when it came to women. "Hey Alex, can I talk to you for a second?" Paul asked, glancing around to make sure no one else was nearby. Alex raised an eyebrow, noticing the unusual tension in Paul's voice. "Sure, what's up?" Paul shuffled his feet, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, man, I need you to do me a huge favor." He hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "It's about Maya." Alex furrowed his brow. "Maya? From HR?" He had only interacted with Maya Reynolds a handful of times, a quiet woman with straight brown hair and soft, reserved eyes. She was in her late 20s, often dressed in sensible office attire, and usually kept to herself at the company's social events. While Alex had always found her polite, he hadn't thought much about her beyond the occasional casual greeting. "Yeah, her," Paul said, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "She's been really down lately. You know, she's always so quiet. And lately it's been getting worse. I heard her talking to one of the other employees about how she feels completely invisible at the office. That no one ever takes her seriously, especially when it comes to things like dating." Alex's eyes widened in surprise. "I didn't know she felt that way. I thought she was just shy or something." "Exactly," Paul replied, a little too quickly. "But that's the thing, she's actually a really great person. And I know it sounds weird, but she's been having some, issues with dating. She's had a tough time finding someone who doesn't judge her right away. You see, she has a prosthetic leg, and she's been very self-conscious about it. People don't know how to handle her, and it's affecting her confidence." Alex listened intently, trying to understand where Paul was coming from. He hadn't known about Maya's prosthetic leg, and he certainly hadn't considered that it might be something she felt embarrassed about. "So, what do you want me to do?" Alex asked, his brow furrowing as he considered Paul's request. Paul looked down at the floor, his voice lower than before. "I was hoping you could, well, take her out. Just a dinner, nothing fancy. I know it sounds crazy, but I think she just needs to feel like someone sees her. You know, like she's worth spending time with, just like anyone else." Alex stared at Paul for a moment, trying to process what he was asking. Paul wasn't one to make wild requests, but this was definitely out of left field. "You want me to go on a date with her? Like a romantic date?" No, Paul quickly said, shaking his head. "I mean, I don't think it's like that. It's more about just giving her a chance to feel like she belongs. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just have a nice dinner. Make her feel like she's seen for who she is. I'm asking because, well, she's never really had that kind of experience, and I think it would help her feel better about herself." Alex ran a hand through his hair, glancing around the break room as he thought about what Paul was asking. He was hesitant. Sure, he could go on a dinner date, but the idea of being part of someone else's emotional journey felt like a lot to handle. He wasn't exactly the kind of guy who had patience for projects, and he wasn't sure he was the right person to help someone boost their self-esteem. But at the same time, he could see the sincerity in Paul's eyes. This wasn't some fleeting whim. This was a friend in need, and Alex had always been the guy who helped others when they needed it most. All right, Alex said, finally giving in. "I'll do it, but I'm not promising anything more than dinner, okay? I'm just going to go, make sure she feels normal, I guess. But I'm not trying to fix anything or start something I can't finish." Paul let out a relieved sigh. "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me. I promise it won't be weird. Just give it a shot. She's not asking for much, just someone to treat her like a person." Alex nodded, though his mind was still racing. He couldn't help but feel a little guilty. He wasn't sure if he was doing this for Paul or if he was simply trying to prove to himself that he could handle such a situation. Either way, he was now committed, and he had to see it through. He just hoped it wouldn't be too uncomfortable. The night had arrived, and Alex Sinclair stood outside the small, cozy cafe, trying to calm the nervous energy in his chest. The evening air was cool, and the city's skyline shimmered in the distance, casting a soft glow on the bustling streets below. Alex had dressed casually, but still put together. A dark blue button-down shirt that fit just right, paired with a pair of sleek black jeans. His hands felt clammy, a stark contrast to his usual calm demeanor, as he checked his watch for the 100th time. Was he making the right choice? Should he have done this? His thoughts were a mix of nerves and curiosity. He had agreed to this dinner to help out his friend Paul, but now that the time had come, he wasn't so sure how it would play out. After all, he was about to ask someone, Maya Reynolds, a quiet and reserved woman in the office, out to dinner, with absolutely no romantic interest in mind. Or so he thought. As he waited, Alex replayed the conversation he'd had earlier that day. He'd walked into the HR department, trying to be casual, but as soon as he saw her sitting at her desk, all the words he had practiced seemed to vanish from his mind. She was hunched over her computer, scribbling something in her notes, completely unaware of his presence. He cleared his throat. Maya's head shot up and her brown eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, Alex, I didn't see you there," she said, her voice soft but genuine. She smiled awkwardly, and Alex noticed her cheeks turning a shade of pink. "Hey, Maya," he said, his voice a little hesitant. "So, I wanted to talk to you about something." "Sure, what's up?" she asked, setting her pen down and folding her hands in her lap. Alex felt an odd sense of nervousness. He was about to ask her out, but not in the way that most people thought about asking someone on a date. He wasn't sure how this would go, but he knew he needed to be honest. "Look, I know this might sound strange, but I was wondering if you'd like to go out for dinner sometime," he said, quickly adding, "Not as a date, just as a way to get to know you better. You've been a little quiet around the office, and I thought maybe we could hang out. No pressure." Maya blinked, clearly taken aback. She hadn't expected him to ask. Alex Sinclair, the confident, outgoing guy who was always surrounded by people, wanted to spend time with her? She felt her heart race in her chest, and her mind spun in 1,000 directions. Was this a joke? Was he feeling sorry for her? She forced herself to speak, but her voice trembled slightly. "Wait, you want to go out with me? Like, for dinner?" Alex smiled reassuringly, trying to ease the tension. "Yeah, I mean, it's just dinner. I thought we could talk, get to know each other a bit better. No expectations, just two people having a meal." Maya felt the breath leave her chest, and for a moment she was frozen. She had always kept her distance from Alex, assuming someone like him wouldn't ever be interested in someone like her. She was quiet, shy, and so often the invisible one in the office. She had never been the type of woman that caught attention, let alone from someone as charismatic as Alex. But now, as she stood there in front of him, the disbelief faded, replaced by a small flicker of hope. Her heart beat faster, and she couldn't help but smile. Okay, I guess dinner sounds good, but no promises?" Alex chuckled lightly. Of course, no promises, just a dinner and a chat. That was all it took. A simple invitation, and Maya had agreed. She tried to tell herself that it was just a friendly gesture, but deep down she felt a strange flutter in her chest. Could this be the moment that changed everything? The cafe was a small, intimate place tucked away on a quiet street in the heart of the city. It had a warm, cozy ambiance with dim lighting, wood-paneled walls, and soft jazz music playing in the background. Alex had chosen it because it felt unpretentious, not too trendy or flashy. Just a place where two people could sit and talk, away from the office and its complications. When Maya arrived, the faint chime of the doorbell above the entrance echoed through the cafe. She stood in the doorway for a moment, glancing around, her brown eyes scanning the dimly lit space. Her nerves were in full swing. She wasn't used to this, to people like Alex taking an interest in her. She had spent years hiding behind her shyness, behind her prosthetic leg, behind the emotional walls she had carefully constructed. As she spotted Alex sitting in a corner booth, his broad shoulders relaxed, his smile wide and genuine, her heart skipped a beat. He stood to greet her, a little too enthusiastically, as if he was genuinely happy to see her. "Maya," he said, a little too loudly, but his voice was warm and inviting. "Hey, Alex," she said, her own voice quiet but steady. She was grateful for his easygoing manner. He made it easier for her to be herself, even if that self was someone who hadn't been noticed for a long time. They sat down, and Alex waved for the waiter to bring over the menus, though he didn't immediately look at his own. Instead, he turned his attention to Maya, as if he was trying to study her, but not in an intrusive way. It was more like he was trying to figure out what made her tick, what made her special. "So, how's your week been?" Alex asked, leaning back slightly in his seat, making sure not to crowd her space. His voice was soft, conversational, and completely free of the usual office pressures. Maya, still a little unsure of herself, took a deep breath before responding. "It's been fine. Just the usual work stuff. You know, paperwork, reports, meetings." Her voice trailed off as she thought about the conversations and whispers she had overheard earlier that day. She pushed those thoughts aside. "What about you? How's the marketing department? Still breaking all the sales records?" Alex chuckled. "Oh, you know, same old, same old. Always working on the next big thing. But I'm not really here to talk about work," he added, with a playful smile, lifting his eyebrows. "I thought tonight was supposed to be about getting to know each other a bit better." Maya smiled shyly, feeling a little more at ease. Alex's charm was effortless, his demeanor disarming. He didn't make her feel like she was any different from anyone else. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to hide anything about herself. "Well, I guess if we're talking about me, I'm not exactly the exciting type," she said, laughing softly. "I mostly stay at home reading or watching movies. A pretty boring life, really." Alex's eyes lit up at that. "Are you kidding me?" he said, genuinely surprised. "That sounds great. I love movies, especially classics. What kind of stuff do you watch?" Maya paused, surprised by his enthusiasm. She had never expected someone like Alex, someone so seemingly outgoing and popular, to share a similar interest in something so quiet and solitary. "I love anything from the old film noir to historical dramas. You know, the kind of movies that make you think, not just entertain." Alex grinned, his eyes twinkling. "Okay, I can get behind that. I might have to borrow some of your favorites. Maybe we can have a movie marathon sometime." For a brief moment, Maya felt a strange warmth in her chest. There was something in Alex's tone that made her feel special, seen. It wasn't just that he was saying things to be polite. He was genuinely interested in her opinions, her likes, her thoughts, and that was enough to make her feel like the center of attention for once, in the best way possible. As their dinner progressed, the conversation naturally flowed. They shared their favorite books, their dreams, and even their childhood memories. Alex was intrigued by Maya's subtle yet confident humor. Despite her reserved nature, there was an underlying strength in the way she carried herself, in the way she navigated her life with her prosthetic leg. It was clear that she didn't let it define her, but instead, she simply moved forward, taking everything life threw at her with a kind of quiet grace. It was then that Alex found himself leaning in a little closer, his voice softer as he asked, "So, what's one thing about you that no one at work knows? Something personal?" Maya blinked, caught off guard by the question. She hadn't expected him to dig deeper into her life. She thought she could just glide through the evening without revealing too much about herself. But there was something in his gaze, an openness, a sincerity, that made her want to share. Taking a breath, Maya looked down at her hands, twirling her napkin nervously before speaking. "Well, I guess a lot of people don't know about my leg," she began. "That it's not a birth defect or anything like that. I was in a car accident a few years ago. I was lucky to survive, but yeah, the leg is prosthetic, and it's always been hard for me. Not because of the leg itself, but because of how others see me. Some people look at me like I'm broken, like I'm incomplete." Alex's heart ached as he listened, his eyes softening. He hadn't known about her accident, and he certainly hadn't realized the emotional weight it carried for her. He wanted to say something comforting, but the words felt inadequate. Instead, he reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like the most genuine thing he could do in that moment. "I think you're one of the strongest people I've met," Alex said, his voice full of admiration. "I can't even imagine what you've been through, and it's clear that your strength comes from within. You don't let anything stop you, do you?" Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard those words before, at least not from someone who genuinely meant them. For the first time, she didn't feel like her disability was a burden to anyone else. She felt accepted, understood, and even admired. But just as the moment felt intimate, a loud crash of laughter erupted from a table nearby. A group of her colleagues from the office had entered the cafe, and they had clearly spotted her and Alex sitting together. Maya felt a pang of embarrassment, her heart sinking. She recognized the voice. It was Mark, one of the more popular guys at the office. He was laughing too loudly, and his gaze lingered on her and Alex, a little too much for comfort. "Hey, look, it's the invisible girl and the office prince," Mark called out from across the room, loud enough for everyone in the cafe to hear. Maya's face turned crimson as the group erupted into laughter. Alex's expression darkened. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't known that her colleagues would be so cruel, but there was something about their mocking tone, their obvious cruelty, that ignited something inside him. He wasn't going to let this happen, not on his watch. "Hey, Mark," Alex called out, standing up abruptly, his voice sharp and firm. "How about you mind your own business? This is a dinner between two people. Maybe you should take a hint and keep your comments to yourself." The laughter died down, and Mark shot him an incredulous look, as if Alex had just dared to stand up to him. But Alex didn't back down. Maya's eyes widened, her heart fluttering with both surprise and relief. "Thanks," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alex smiled softly, a glimmer of determination in his eyes. "Don't let anyone make you feel small, Maya. You deserve better than that." For the rest of the evening, the atmosphere at their table was different. The earlier awkwardness faded, replaced with a shared understanding. As the conversation turned to lighter topics, Maya couldn't help but feel something inside her shift. Alex wasn't just some guy from the office who had asked her out of pity. He was someone who saw her, truly saw her, for who she was. And in that moment, she realized that this dinner was the beginning of something unexpected, something that could change her life forever. And for Alex, it was the beginning of something else. A deep, undeniable connection with a woman who, despite her quiet exterior, was more than capable of leaving a lasting impression on him. He found himself drawn to her strength, her intelligence, and the quiet charm she had that made him feel like he was seeing her for the first time in a way that no one else had. The week following their dinner felt like a dream for Maya. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel lighter, more confident, as if something had shifted in her life. Alex continued to make an effort to talk to her in the office, even when others were watching. His presence in her life had created a small, glowing pocket of hope. Hope that maybe she wasn't invisible, that she could matter to someone. But dreams often have a way of unraveling, and Maya's dream shattered sooner than she expected. It started in the break room on a quiet Thursday morning. Maya had just poured herself a cup of coffee when she overheard hushed voices behind her. She recognized them immediately: Julia and Mark, two of the most talkative and judgmental people in the office. "I still can't believe Alex actually went through with it," Julia whispered, her voice dripping with mockery. Mark snickered. "Right? Paul really owes him for this one. I mean, who else would agree to take her out? It's like Alex did some kind of charity work." Maya froze, her hand trembling as she held her coffee mug. Her stomach churned and her chest tightened. Did she hear that right? Paul? Charity work? What were they talking about? Julia laughed softly. "You know, I almost feel bad for Maya. She probably thinks it was real. Like, come on, why would someone like Alex be interested in someone like her?" Mark's voice dropped to a conspiratorial tone. "I heard Paul begged Alex to take her out. Something about her being lonely and needing a confidence boost. Alex probably just didn't want to look like a jerk, so he said yes." Maya's world tilted. Her breath caught in her throat as her heart began to race. She felt like the walls of the break room were closing in on her, trapping her in a suffocating cocoon of humiliation. The words echoed in her mind. Charity work. Confidence boost. Why would someone like him be interested in her? Her fingers clenched tightly around her mug as she fought to steady her breathing. She wanted to march out of the room, confront them, demand an explanation. But she couldn't. She felt paralyzed, her mind racing with disbelief and hurt. Later that afternoon, Maya mustered the courage to find Alex. She wasn't the type to let something like this fester inside her. She needed answers, even if they hurt. She found him in one of the smaller meeting rooms, reviewing a stack of marketing reports. When she knocked on the door, he looked up and smiled warmly. "Hey Maya, what's up?" His casual friendliness, once comforting, now felt like a cruel facade. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, and stood stiffly across the table. "Alex," she began, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Alex immediately sensed the tension in her tone, his smile fading. He set the papers down and leaned forward slightly. "Of course. What's wrong?" Maya hesitated, the words catching in her throat. But then she took a deep breath and forced herself to speak. "Did Paul ask you to take me out? As a favor? Because you felt sorry for me?" Alex's eyes widened in shock. "What? Who told you that?" "Just answer the question, Alex," she said firmly, her voice cracking under the weight of her emotions. Alex hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking down at the table as if the answers were written in the grain of the wood. "Okay, look," he said finally, his voice soft. "Yes, Paul asked me to take you out. But..." Maya's heart sank, her worst fears confirmed. She felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. "So it's true," she interrupted, her voice shaking. "The only reason you asked me to dinner was because you felt sorry for me? Because you thought I was some kind of charity case?" "No, it's not like that," Alex said quickly, standing up and walking toward her. "Paul might have been the one who suggested it, but I agreed because I wanted to. I swear, Maya, it wasn't out of pity." She stepped back, crossing her arms defensively. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? To think that someone actually wanted to spend time with me, only to find out it was some kind of favor for a friend? Do you know how small that makes me feel?" Alex's face was etched with regret. "Maya, listen to me. That's not what this was. I'll admit, I didn't know much about you before, but after that night, after talking to you, getting to know you, I realized how amazing you are. You're smart, funny, and stronger than anyone I've ever met. I didn't ask you out to make you feel small. I did it because I wanted to spend time with you." Maya shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "But you didn't want to in the beginning, did you? You only gave me a chance because someone else asked you to. Do you have any idea how painful that is? To know that I wasn't worth noticing until someone put the idea in your head?" Alex took a step closer, his expression earnest. "You're right. At first I didn't see you the way I should have, and that's my fault, not yours. But that dinner changed everything for me, Maya. You changed everything. I've been thinking about you every day since then. You're incredible, and I hate that I ever made you feel like you weren't." Maya's heart ached at his words, but the pain of the betrayal was still fresh. She wanted to believe him, but the hurt was too raw. "I need time, Alex," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to figure out how I feel about all of this." Alex nodded, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I understand. Take all the time you need. But please, Maya, know that I care about you, more than I can put into words." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Alex standing alone, the weight of his mistake hanging heavy in the air. That night, Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring out the window as the city lights twinkled in the distance. She replayed the events of the day in her mind, her emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. She felt angry, hurt, and humiliated. But there was also a small voice in the back of her mind, telling her that Alex's words had been sincere. Could she forgive him? Could she move past the way it had all started and focus on the connection they had built? Or would the sting of betrayal be too much to overcome? As the hours ticked by, Maya realized that the answer wasn't simple. Her heart was torn, caught between the pain of the truth and the possibility of something real, something meaningful. She would have to decide if Alex deserved another chance, if they deserved another chance, and that decision would change everything. A few days later, Alex found Maya sitting alone in the park during lunch break. The pain in her eyes was still there, but there was also a quiet resolve. She looked up as he approached, her heart pounding in her chest. "Maya," Alex began softly, sitting next to her on the bench. "I've thought about what you said, and I can't blame you for being hurt. I was an idiot for not seeing you sooner. I shouldn't have needed someone else to tell me how amazing you are. But I see it now. I see you, Maya." Maya's eyes softened, but there was hesitation in her gaze. "I don't want to be anyone's charity case. I want to be loved for who I am, not because of a favor someone else asked." "I get that," Alex said, his voice earnest. "And I'm here because I want to be. I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. I wasn't trying to play the hero. I just want a chance with you." Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she nodded, her heart warming. "I believe you," she whispered, finally letting herself trust again. Alex smiled, taking her hand gently in his. "Then let's start over. No more pretense, just us." And in that moment, Maya realized that love could be found in the most unexpected places, even after all the hurt.